For our next session on global health, human health, and ecosystems, our moderator is the Senior Science Editor at HHMI Tangled Bank Studios, Richard Stone.
Hi, everyone. My name is Richard Stone with Tangled Bank Studios. Welcome to our session. We're going to explore how our collective health as a species depends on maintaining the health of ecosystems and the wildlife with which we share this planet. Our world is awash in microbes, not only pathogens that are harmful or deadly, but also beneficial microbes and countless others that are simply there going about their business as invisible cogs of Earth's ecosystems. The microbial world and our macroscopic world are interconnected. You could say that over millions of years, both worlds found a way to live with one another. But human activity in recent decades, from raising rainforests to the global wildlife trade, is unbalancing our interconnected world. The COVID-19 pandemic, it would seem, is the latest disastrous consequence of human encroachment on wildlife. So, what actions can we take to protect human health and the health of ecosystems? We're going to hear from three experts on the front line of this battle to restore ecological health. Nooshin Razani is director of the Center for Nature and Health at UCSF Children's Hospital in Oakland, California. Jérémy Bouyer is a medical entomologist at the joint FAO-IAEA Division of Nuclear Techniques in Food and Agriculture in Vienna, Austria. Muletz Wolz is a molecular pathogen scientist at the Smithsonian National Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute in Washington, D.C. Welcome, everybody. So I'm going to start with you, Carly. These days, the news, our collective attention as a species, yes, is dominated by the COVID-19 pandemic. But before the novel coronavirus emerged, an entire class of life forms had been under siege from a terrible pathogen for decades. Tell me about the Kittredge fungus.
Hi, Rich. Thank you. Yes, the Kittredge fungus that you referenced, we call amphibian chytrid, and it has caused one of the deadliest diseases that we know of. It can infect and kill individuals from over 500 different species of frogs and salamanders. 500 different species. It's just not as widely known because we don't see frogs and salamanders as often as, say, birds and mammals. It's like a pathogen in mammals that could kill squirrels and jaguars, giraffes, zebras, kangaroos, but in frogs. It was first described in the late 1990s when we realized it had a global distribution, but it had like decades and decades earlier. It's now in 85 countries worldwide and has led to the extinction of 90 species of amphibians. I'll name a few of those: the gastric brooding frog in Australia, the golden toad in Costa Rica, the Chianti spray toad in Tanzania, extinct. But while terrible, there is some reason for optimism. We're starting to find species, individuals from species we thought were nearly extinct again in the wild. And we know that not all species die from the disease. So we're learning from them what it takes to fight chytrid.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carly. I'd like to focus in on one strain of chytrid that started to devastate a group of amphibians that's near and dear to your heart. Can you expand on that?
Yes, the first chytrid I just spoke about we call BD, and it's deadlier in frogs. The other chytrid we recently discovered is deadlier in salamanders, and we call that B-Sal. It was identified about 8 years ago, where we found it in Europe, killing salamanders there, but likely spread out of Asia, potentially through globalization and the pet trade, where it's currently killing salamanders there, sadly.
So the situation in Europe is pretty grave, but yet there is reason for optimism and hope in the fight against B-Sal.
Absolutely. We are lucky that B-Sal is not here yet in the United States, as far as we know. The United States is special because we have over 30% of the world's salamanders live here, 200 different species. And if you extend that to North and Central America, we have 70% of the world's species here. And there's no evidence that B-Sal is here yet. So we have this opportunity to protect these salamanders that are important in ecosystem function and food webs. We know in some regions of the US, they make up more biomass than all of the birds in the forest, and sometimes more than all of the small mammals, all of the mice and other small mammals and squirrels. And so they're very important. And because of their importance, a group of scientists, conservation biologists, and resource managers petitioned the United States Fish and Wildlife Service to do decisive and quick action to ban the importation of salamanders that could be potential carriers of B-Sal. And the US Fish and Wildlife Service put in this ban. Currently, 201 species are banned from importing into the United States. And we now have this opportunity where we have developed strategies if B-Sal were to show up. And we're very hopeful we're prepared this time if it were to show up to protect our beautiful salamanders here.
Well, that's a great success story. Next question I would like to ask is, how do we combat a deadly pathogen that's already entrenched in an ecosystem? So I'd like to bring in Jérémy to discuss his approach to attacking a disease vector, one species that transmits disease to another species. In this case, the vector has brought suffering and death upon humanity for thousands of years. I'm talking about the mosquito. Pesticides like the infamous DDT are quite effective at suppressing mosquito populations, but these nasty chemicals can unintentionally poison people and other species. Jérémy and his colleagues are pioneering an innovative approach designed to target only mosquitoes. But before we discuss the technique, Jérémy, please tell us briefly about one place you are working and the toll the disease has taken there.
Yeah, so one of the places where we work, Rich, is Brazil, because it's a country where there was big epidemics of Zika, particularly in the period 2015 to 2016, where they declared more than 200,000 cases. And this was associated with an epidemic of newborns with microcephaly. So it was really the worst problem that was ever seen with this microcephaly. And then it's a country that is also very much affected by dengue. So only in the 6 first months of 2019, they declared 2 million cases of dengue, and they have 4 serotypes of the virus circulating. And in these countries, a major vector is Aedes aegypti, which is an invasive species that was introduced to Brazil through trade in the past.
So clearly, drenching Brazil with DDT to target mosquitoes is not an attractive option. You are refining a much better option called the sterile insect technique. Can you just step us through very briefly how that works?
Yes. The sterile insect technique, or SIT, is environment friendly, and it's an insect pest management method where you mass rear sterile males. You mass rear mosquitoes, you sort the males, you irradiate them, and then you release it over a target area. And when the males mate with wild females, they transfer sperm with random mutations, and you have no offspring. So it's a birth control technique, and if you do that for a long period and systematically, you can reduce the target population or even eliminate it in some situations. So in my ERC project, we are also trying to boost the sterile insect technique based on the idea that globally for animals, it's easier for males to touch females than to mate with them. So we have decided to cover the males with biopesticides before releasing them. And if they succeed to touch a female, even without succeeding to mate, they will transmit the biopesticide, and the females will bring the biopesticide to the larval habitats, which will impact the population probably up to 100 times more than the sterile insect technique alone.
SIT, of course, it's not new. It's been in use for decades. But your team is using a new technology, one that's simple and affordable and can be used anywhere to more effectively distribute sterile male mosquitoes in the environment.
Yeah, you're right. We are trying to develop the automated release of sterile males mosquitoes by drone, which might reduce the cost of releasing sterile males by more than 20 times. And so the first model we developed was tested in Brazil in 2018, but it was a big drone. So it was tested with We Robotics and Moscamed, which is coordinating an SIT program in Brazil. And this drone was 12 kilograms, so it's a bit risky to fly 12 kilograms over people. And it might represent quite a risk in case of crash. So we decided to reduce the size and the weight of these drones. And within my ERC project, which is called Moscarel, we are trying to develop a small drone, which is only 900 grams, and can carry 200 grams payload of mosquitoes, and that can fly up to 15 minutes over populated areas. And this drone will be conformed to the C1 European category, which means that it will be authorized to fly over populated people. And with this drone, we hope that we will be able to have a very homogeneous release rate over the target areas.
So Jérémy and Carly have described battles being waged against diseases in humans and wildlife, but how should we best interconnect with nature in times of peace? Nooshin, you have some interesting thoughts on this question. First, tell us about some of the patients that you work with at Children's Hospital in Oakland.
Hi, I work in a pediatric clinic that serves mostly underserved patients. So in the United States, that's people who are on public health insurance or have no health insurance at all, which tends to be people from all over the world, more than actually 80 languages represented in our clinic, and families who are experiencing stress from poverty and also issues of systemic racism.
And you have found one thing many of these children and families have in common, a lack of access to green spaces. Can you explain a little bit about something called nature deficit disorder?
Yeah, I mean, human beings evolved to be in eco-diverse environments, and whether that's access to trees or animals or our internal microbiome, we evolved to be within eco-diversity. And what does that look for the modern person to not have that? Basically, the research shows that it has an impact, a profound impact across the lifespan. So things like preterm labor, birth weight, cognition, childhood development, childhood attention span, childhood learning. In adulthood, the rates of anxiety, depression, even cardiovascular disease, and ultimately lifespan are associated with how much green space we live around. And so the clinical interventions to get people in nature are one targeted way to try to address that. Another thing that we are working on is systemic change to bring nature closer to home so that we reduce the inequity in who lives in and around nature.
And you've also come up with something that some people might view as a radical idea, prescribing time outdoors as preventative medicine for the children and their families. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think when I started this work, I wanted people to be in the wilderness as much as possible, but I was quickly humbled by the fact that there has been a great migration indoors across our species. And most of the children that I interact with are spending 23 to 24 hours indoors. And that's definitely compounded now by the shelter-in-place orders across much of the world. And so we're trying to create habits. And sometimes a prescription from a doctor helps create that habit to let you know that being outdoors and specifically being in nature is not an optional. It is a fundamental right for a child to have that time outdoors. So yes, we do prescribe it. And in addition to giving our prescription, we actually have facilitated outings at our clinic where once a month we meet with patients and we get on a bus and we go to local parks. We're very lucky that our parks are actually quite profoundly beautiful. The thing that we're trying to get on each outing is this feeling of awe. And awe is something that is an overwhelming emotion that essentially helps you connect to other things and takes your focus from being internal to being more external. And that has been shown to have an effect on mood, stress, and relationships with other people.
Thanks so much, Nooshin. We're coming up on nearing the end of our session here. I'd like to pose a wrap-up question to our panelists. And if you can spend about 30 seconds each answering, that would be great. So you're all experts in your respective disciplines, but what really unites your work is an effort to heal and achieve a harmony with nature. I'm sure many among our audience today support what you're striving for, but how can members of the public get involved and play an active role? Carly, why don't you take the first crack at that?
Yes, members of the public, we need our eyes everywhere to see if B-Sal were to show up in the US or if there's a die-off from the first Kittredge that I referenced. So if anybody is out enjoying nature, which will be beneficial for your health as well, and you see a dead frog or a dead salamander, especially a dead salamander, we're asking people to take a picture if they can, or just at least record what they see and where they see it. And if you were to Google search report dead salamander, you would come to the B-Sal task force where you could find directions on how to report that. Because the sooner we know where B-Sal is, if it were to show up, the faster we can test, and isolate, as similar as our strategies that we're using for COVID-19.
Thanks so much, Carly. Jérémy, how about in your area?
So in the area of insect control, I think that the public has to insist that we stop using multi-spectrum insecticides because when we do so, we are killing the insect predators that are controlling the insect pests, and we need more and more insecticide, and it's not acceptable. You know, when you look at the global scale, we see that there is a loss of biodiversity and biomass of insects, and they are a critical component of our Earth's ecosystems. And the second thing is that we must stop thinking that because a species is harmful to humans, we must necessarily kill it, you know, or destroy or eliminate it. We have to assess each situation and see if a species really needs to be eliminated when it's harmful to humans, because every species has a right to be on Earth and have an intrinsic value.
Thanks, Jérémy. Nooshin, I'm going to give the final word to you.
I think that what we can do is multi-level. I mean, in these unbelievably stressful times, it's important to remember that even taking care of ourselves is taking care of nature. And so I would take care of yourself and slow down, follow your own internal rhythms, and really, really connect in an authentic way with your family and whoever you're sheltered in place with. After that, I would notice the nature near you where you live. And I would be observant and connected because nature belongs to each of us. We are each part of it and we are responsible to be stewards of it. If you can get that down in these crazy times, then yes. If you can advocate for your right to have healthy ecosystems wherever you live, whether you live in an apartment, or in a busy city street, or in a rural area, that advocacy is actually important to your lifespan and your health.
Thank you very much. I want to thank our wonderful panelists. Wish you good health, stay safe, and for our audience as well. Thank you again.